Thank you very, very much, Hank, for that wonderful, warm introduction. And thank you for being so persistent about joining the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Lynn Westmoreland started this whole thing last year along with John Lewis, and he just sort of caught me on the house floor. He said, would you come to Atlanta? I said, what, for what? What kind of trouble you got down there? Mostly people come and ask me when they got trouble. He said, no, we just want you to come and talk to this Council for Quality Growth. I said, oh, well, it sounds very good. Is that an acronym? Is this for real? Or, what do they do? Oh, and he put his arm around me. He said, no, they're real good, friendly folks. They just want you to. So I said, well, all right, let's. John Lewis had asked me to come down, and I couldn't come to Atlanta. I couldn't make it because I had something going in my own district at the very time. And then the stars aligned, and when you have Lynn Westmoreland, Hank Johnson, Tom Graves, and John Lewis also, you got to come to Atlanta. Well, all right, I'll come. And now I'm happy I came. My first, not really the first, but the first visit as a transportation person was some 13 years ago when Bud Schuster, then chairman of the committee, and I was ranking member, came here to look at the very face of unmitigated, unrelenting congestion. And we traveled around, saw all the choke points in Atlanta and where traffic wasn't doing what it should be doing, moving. And I will always remember a news conference we held after various events at the end of the day, and after all the questions had been asked, and that's when you have to leave. You got to get up before the last question is asked. That's the one that always kills you. Reporter said, well, Congressman Oberstar, why are you, a Democrat, traveling with Bud Schuster, a Republican? I said, well, I've never seen a Democratic road or a Republican bridge. But if we work together, we can build all American roads and all American bridges. Well, undaunted, the reporter turned to Bud Schuster and said, well, why are you, Mr. Schuster, Republican, traveling with Jim Oberstar, the Democrat? I said, because Jim Oberstar and I are joined at the hip. Reporter put his microphone down, turned off the camera, went, there was no story there. But that is the story. That is the story of this committee. That's why you have Lynn Westmoreland. That's why you have Tom Graves. Why we had Nathan Deal, who I think has gone on to another event, which he better do if he wants to win. But he started life on our committee. He started life in Congress on our committee. John Lewis did. He was there, got his training, and then he went off to the Ways and Means Committee. And you learn how to do it on the Transportation Committee, then you go somewhere else and do it. Actually, our committee was the first committee of the first Congress in 1789, the Committee on Rivers and Harbors. I started life in Congress in 1963 as clerk on the subcommittee on Rivers and Harbors. In that first Congress in September 1789, the Committee on Rivers and Harbors authorized and moved the first act, the first Congress, to authorize the construction and maintenance of a lighthouse at Hampton Roads. And the second act of the first Congress was like the first, also from the Committee on Rivers and Harbors, to establish and maintain a lighthouse at Cape Henry on the entrance to Chesapeake Bay. And the third act of the first Congress was to establish the revenue cutter service to collect duties on inbound cargoes and pay the debts of the Revolutionary War. That also was Committee on Rivers and Harbors. The very foundation of this country. The first legislators, think of what they did. They created all the departments of government, the very first ones. They charted a new course. They had a vision. They had a sense that this nation was founded by the water. People came here by the water. Our goods and people moved by the water. And it needed safe transportation. Lighthouses were the means for safety. And the Constitution also directs the Congress to establish and maintain post roads. And that also became the work of the Committee on Rivers and Harbors in later years. And out of that eventually came the Interstate Highway Program. Out of that came all of the movement of people by water, rail, air, highway. It all originates from and continues through our committee. And that's why I think this committee has had this reputation of being bipartisan. In the 110th Congress, we pulled together 6 years of work done on the programs of the Corps of Engineers, levees, dams, improvements of the locks on the Mississippi, Ohio, Illinois River, reestablishment of the Everglades, restoring the wetlands in the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi. For 6 years, that legislation either had moved through our committee, once through the House, never through the other body. Not much moves in the other body. They can't even pass the prayer over there. Somebody put a, Lynn, stop laughing so hard. They put a hold on the prayer, you know. So I brought our ranking member, a good friend John Micah from Florida together and said, let's just take those projects that have gone through this committee, the ones we know have been scrubbed and addressed and where there is a local sponsor, and we're going to do just 2 new things. We're going to require every member to sign a document that they do not have a family or personal financial interest, and that there is a local sponsor for the project. So we were the first ones in this new Congress to do that in the beginning of 2007. The bill moved through subcommittee, full committee, through the House by 378 votes. Remarkably, the Senate picked it up. Actually, I showed them how. We had a little preschool session with the Senate, told them this is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. Head start, I called it, for Senate. And they passed the bill. We had a 45-minute conference. And then President Bush vetoed the bill. And that veto was overridden. There were, in the history of the Congress, there have been 1,170 vetoes. Only 106 had been overridden. This was the 107th override. And now you do that only when there is complete bipartisan buy-in and participation and support. And that is what we strive to do in this committee, to listen, to be open, to listen to one another, and take the best ideas of both sides, put them together, and do something good for this country. And that's what you're about in this Council for Quality Growth. And Yvonne, thank you very much for that. I was quite surprised of your offer to make a contribution to a charity. So Others Might Eat was founded by Father John Adams almost 40 years ago. To serve the neediest people in the center of Washington, center portion of the city of Washington. My late wife, a deeply spiritual woman, and our 4 children and I would spend weekend cooking gallons of spaghetti sauce according to the Sum recipe, and then pre-cook spaghetti and bring it by the gallon to the Sum kitchen, and then serve the needy people. So a contribution to Sum's great work. They serve 570,000 meals a year. They provide housing, temporary and longer term, not permanent, transitional housing for low income and for homeless people. And they also have a training program where they bring people in off the streets, find what their needs are, and in a very disciplined setting, train them to new skills, and then find jobs for them. Some is an extraordinary example of spirit, the spiritual, and the practical. The St. James of the modern world, who said, "By your works you will be known." And by their works, some has continued to make life better, livable, and healthier for 500,000 people a year. That contribution will be very well used, I assure you. Well, we had a little tour, I shouldn't say little, it was kind of a fast-moving tour of the works underway of the transformation of Atlanta that I found absolutely fascinating. A striking contrast to 13 years ago, when the image of Atlanta was 4 to 6 to 8 hours a day and days on end of unhealthy air, of non-attainment area, of traffic just choking on itself, standing and not moving, to one of transformational neighborhoods, transitional life, a complete reshaping, rebuilding of this city, and of creating a new, viable, exciting, opportune future. In this age of broadband, we may sometimes forget that it's highways and railways and transit systems and airports and water ports, rail systems that move people and goods in our society. In this broadband era, where people tend to worship at the high-tech altar of Wi-Fi, Blackberries, and the laptop, we have to remember, Amazon.com doesn't deliver that book through the wire that you're connecting with it. It has to come by a truck, and that truck has to use a roadway, and that roadway has to be able to be efficient and to move people and the goods to market.